Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kim Barnes, and I work as a research navigation and community facilitation lead with both the Interior Health Research Department and BC Support Unit Interior Center. I would like to begin by acknowledging the land that I'm joining you from today that is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Syilx Nation. I was born here, as was my daughter Sarah, and so my heartstrings are deeply rooted to both the land and the water, especially to the beautiful Okanagan Lake. I express my gratitude to the Okanagan people who have been stewards and caretakers of this land since time immemorial. And I would like to also acknowledge that you are joining us today from many places, either near or far, and we'd like to acknowledge the original caretakers of those lands as well. So welcome to the 13th Annual Okanagan Embrace Aging Month, and for joining us. Embrace Aging is co-hosted by Interior Health and the Institute for Healthy Living and Chronic Disease Prevention at UBC Okanagan. Embrace Aging Month was launched 13 years ago to celebrate and raise awareness about positive aging, and has once again organized a number of educational opportunities and events throughout the month March. These sessions are designed for everyone, young and old alike, and focus on a variety of topics related to healthy aging and ways to improve the quality of life among seniors and their family caregivers. Our goal is to inspire everyone to embrace positive aging. So a couple of housekeeping items. There's a closed captioning feature. To turn closed captioning off, please select the hide caption button on the menu bar. That'll be either at the top or the bottom of your screen. Questions, please feel free to type questions or comments for the speaker into the chat box during the presentation, and questions will be read at the end of the presentation. And feedback for the event, please complete a survey that will be emailed to you. So today's event is brought to you with support of Embrace Aging Month and is titled Taking Control, Aging Gracefully Despite Chronic Conditions. And our speaker is Jonathan Lowe, Health and Wellness Lab Faculty of Kinesiology with the University of Calgary. Take it away, Jonathan.
Thanks, Kim. Hello, everybody. I am super excited to get to spend the next 45 minutes with you talking about something that is near and dear to my heart and obviously is of interest to you because you decided to join this webinar and to dive into a little bit of how we might be able to age gracefully despite life and what happens with our bodies. And primarily, maybe the title, what brought you is to learn about a little bit about taking control and how we might be able to do that. We know that I'll talk about this in a few slides, but one of the paramount things that we hear from individuals who are living with and diagnosed with different chronic conditions is that sense of control is often lost when there's a diagnosis initially. But there are certainly ways that we can take that control back and reestablish our lives and that control within them. So I want to start by actually talking through, hopefully by the end of today, something that you will finish when I finish my talk and the Zoom closes and you go to your dinner tables later today and you say, oh, I attended this webinar, instead of being like, I can't even remember what it was about. The guy was really boring. I don't even know. Maybe you'll be able to educate or talk to with your friends, whether you're going for coffee or what it might be, to say, hey, I actually did learn something. So the objective by the end of today, after you hear my talk, is that hopefully you might be able to make one small change to take control of your life and improve your practice if you're a clinician or even your own health. To be able to prop up that objective that I'm hoping to achieve throughout today, we're going to talk a little bit about technology that is ever present in today's world and is not going anywhere. We're going to talk about exercise and physical activity, which obviously my main where I work generally is in the Faculty of Kinesiology. And we're going to talk about this in the context of aging. And so as we do that, hopefully there might be something that you might think, that's something that I want to do differently, or that's something that I do want to change, or something I could feel comfortable changing. I encourage you to write it down. And maybe that might be a takeaway that in 6 months' time, you may not remember a single thing that I talk about or a single slide, but you may remember that single thing that you wrote down of what you wanted to improve. So to start, I want to go back to the very beginning. And I want to think back thousands and thousands of years to our ancient ancestors. And you think of nomads or indigenous individuals or cave people. Sometimes we think about these individuals that traveled across wherever they may be living, the land they were living, and a lot of their survival was based off of what we might call feast and famine. And so these individuals, obviously, there were times when food was plentiful, whether that was a seasonal thing or whether that was related to the place of living. There was food that was abundant. However, there was often times where food wasn't as abundant. Um, and so this feast and famine dichotomy was ever present thousands of years ago. And our ancestors really did survive by trying to expend as little energy as possible, because maybe the next day they may have run into some sort of food that they would require them to expend a lot of energy chasing after, and maybe using that food or that animal, be it for food. And so there was this interplay that needed to happen for survival. Um, and if we then fast forward to thousands of years now to present day, the 21st century, those ancient ancestors, there was a lot of physical activity that was required in walking, in following food, in moving for survival. However, today, in today's day and age, there's been a lot of physical activity that has been removed from our lives. And a lot of different things that have been introduced with this advent of technology, as we will continue to talk about, that has really taken physical activity out of our lives. So I want you to think about that for a second. And if you think about ways that this exists in the modern world, obviously we've got cars, whereas our ancient ancestors did not have that luxury. We've got food that we don't necessarily have to fight for or even expend energy to obtain. In fact, today you can skip the dishes and expend zero energy, maybe one single calorie that would require you getting up from your couch to open the door to grab the food that you just ordered. Not at all like our ancient ancestors that needed to expend that energy to get food. And we know ever since COVID that this has been even more abundant in the world. We know that beyond skipping the dishes, there's a lot of things that have been created or invented, a lot of businesses that beg for our attention and beg for our money, that enable us to be sedentary in a way. And so in a sense, there's again this dichotomy, whereas our ancient ancestors, there was a feast and famine. In today's day and age, it's more really about survival, but on the realm of physical activity in and physical activity engineered out of our lives. And where can we find that physical activity? I can sit on my couch and I can talk to my Google or my Alexa, and I can have it turn on my TV. I can have it turn down the volume. I can have it broadcast to another part of my house, so I don't even have to go up the stairs to talk to my kids. There's lots of times and lots of examples of how this is happening in our world in each of our lives. We know that physical activity, inactivity is quite prevalent in today's day and age. Again, when we compare this to our ancient ancestors, there's estimates from the World Health Organization that indicate that 31% of the global population are not achieving recommended physical activity levels. Only 30%. So that means that 70% of the population are not achieving recommended physical activities, which is quite substantial. And so we think about physical activity, and I'll explain in a few slides a little bit later in my presentation of why this is so important for a lot of areas of our health. So before we go on, though, I want you to stop for a minute. And I've been talking for a while now since we started. And I want you to write down, if you have a pen and a paper, or if you have even a text message to a significant other or somebody in your life, and I want you to write down, where is a place in your life or an activity in your life where you have engineered physical activity out of it? Maybe you have access to public transit, and you maybe, for good or for bad, decide to drive to work. instead of maybe active transit, which might be walking to a bus stop and then taking the bus. Or maybe you decided to take an escalator when you were at the mall instead of taking the stairs. Every time we go to our swimming lessons with my kids, they beg to take the elevator, which is fun for kids. And sometimes I'm a nice dad and I let them. However, most of the time I say, unless you have a good reason, maybe let's just try and take the stairs. So think about that for a second. Or maybe you've thought about that and I want you to write it down. Because really this is hopefully beyond just me talking for a couple of minutes. It should be a workshop for you in the way that you think through your own lives and maybe changes that you can make. So as I mentioned, we have kind of this yin, excuse me, yin and yang effect where we have engineered physical activity out of our lives. But there's also instances where we engineer physical activity into our lives. And I want to talk a little bit about that now. But as I mentioned in the title of today's talk, there's times in our lives where, as I've got here, where crisis might strike. And a lot of that can center around diagnoses of different health conditions or chronic conditions. And that can take the form, many, many forms. And maybe you yourself have not gone through this maybe crisis. It may be not, for some individuals, it's not a crisis, but for a lot of individuals, it can be a crisis to receive a chronic health diagnosis. And so maybe you've experienced this, or maybe you know somebody in your life who's experienced this. And one of the things that we often hear from individuals when there is this diagnosis is, I feel like I lost control of X or Y or Z. Now, I want you to think about that again for a second. If you've received a diagnosis, did you ever feel that way? Did you ever feel like you lost control of your health? Did you feel like you lost control of whatever it might be? Or maybe the individual, if you haven't experienced this, maybe somebody in your life, a parent, a grandparent, or a friend. What have they ever expressed feeling a loss of control of a specific area of their life, or maybe just a loss of control in general? And that can often be quite life-changing and life-altering in a lot of different ways. So sensitivity is required. Now, interestingly, and one of the hopeful things is that when there is a diagnosis of a chronic condition, there's often a way out. There's often a way to manage that chronic condition. So if it's type 2 diabetes, maybe there's medications that might be prescribed. Often that is the case, that there's, okay, let's prescribe this medication that will help you manage your diabetes or your condition. And the number one, however, the number one thing that is prescribed by doctors, I would argue, across all different chronic conditions would be exercise. And I can't really do a show of hands because we're not in a room, but if we were in person, I would say, how, for a show of hands, how many in this room have been told by a physician to exercise or to live a healthier life, right? And often that can invoke maybe feelings of shame, or, well, I'm not living a healthy life, or maybe they don't think I'm exercising enough. But it is very common that this is prescribed, being exercise, to move more, maybe to walk more. Why is that? And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is. And another reason, if we circle back to this idea of control and feeling a loss of control, one of the reasons maybe not, or maybe that a clinician might prescribe exercise is because we know very convincingly that exercise has the ability to increase one's self control or sense of control. And there's this study here that you can see that demonstrates that either long-term participation or even acute bouts. So that is just a single bout of exercise. If I finish today, I feel motivated by Jonathan's speech or talk, so I go outside and I go for a walk. Well, there's a lot of things physiologically that are going to happen, and even in your brain as well, that you may feel enhanced self-control. Now, when we relate this to chronic disease, it's very important because that's what a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of people feel. I got diagnosed with cancer, if that was the case. And maybe I feel a loss of control because my body feels like it's fighting itself. But when I go out to exercise, that is me saying, okay, body, I am going to take control. Instead of sitting and letting this take course, I'm going to try and be proactive to do this. Now, this isn't just exercise. I want to be clear. Obviously, there's nutrition that plays a role, and there's a lot of different things that we can do in our lives to bring that control back. But this is in the context of exercise. And we do know that exercise can really help us take that control and get that control back after there is a diagnosis. So I would encourage you, as we continue to talk, if you're an individual who is living with a chronic disease and has felt like you lost control, or maybe you have a friend, try and think through your life, where could I be more physically active? And that's not to mean you need to go out and run a 5K. Physical activity can take all sorts of different forms. And I really want to emphasize that as we talk today. It can be gardening. It could be golfing with your friend or with your family. It could be taking the dog for a walk. It could be, for some individuals, it could be cleaning the house and getting up and moving. So there's a lot of different things that can be exercise or physical activity. And so really, that's a barrier that a lot of individuals face, is that, well, I don't exercise because I don't like to run. Okay, well, guess what? There's a lot of ways other than running that we can become physically active and where we can achieve our exercise. So as I mentioned, we have this idea of engineering physical activity out of our lives. But the good news is that even with technology and the knowledge that we are obtaining about exercise, we are seeing ways that we can, and knowledge that help us to engineer physical activity into our lives. So technology, as I said at the beginning, with the learning objectives or the outcome, we're going to talk about how technology might be able to enable you to do this. So there is evidence that suggests that technology can produce a success rate of 75% in improving physical activity habits, which is quite substantial. Now, there's debate, of course, whether this helps longevity in a long-term sense, but undoubtedly, if an individual goes out and buys a fitness watch, or if you get given one for Christmas, I can't tell you how many times I work with individuals who say, oh, my kids gave me this Fitbit for Christmas and I'm super excited to take it for a test drive and see how it counts my steps or see how it tracks my sleep. And so that really does have an impact to increase physical activity. Now, again, the important consideration when we're talking about this, of course, is that technology can be expensive. And so where this piece of information might suggest that, okay, well, I'm going to go out and buy a watch, a fitness watch. Maybe you don't have the means to do that. And that's okay, because there's a lot of free ways that you can use technology to improve your success. And we're going to talk about some more of those. So you can see here again, another interesting factoid for you in terms of technology and physical activity, and this idea of taking control of our lives through exercise. That wearable devices can help the health of elderly individuals and give personalized data so that these health behaviors can be changed based on that data. And that it can improve the daily life and independence of elderly individuals. So again, maybe you're somebody who's thinking, oh, as I age, I do want to age gracefully, as Jonathan said in his title. How might I be able to do that? Because I would love to maintain my independence. And so there's a lot of different ways, wearable technology that's out there that is accessible, lower cost, or that is exorbitantly expensive, that can help really give that feedback and that information to improve the daily life. So what does that look like? Again, this idea of engineering physical activity into our lives. I've got a few different examples here, but the list could go on and on and on and on and on. We've got watches. I've alluded to smart watches. Maybe a lot of you might have them or may wear them. There's smart scales that will connect to your phone and give you insights and data. All sorts of every kind of app that you can imagine. You can imagine the app, it exists, and you can get it on your iPad or your phone or your computer. It can be an app to help you manage your nutrition. It can be an app to manage your exercise. Obviously, those are endless exercise applications that you can get. An app to monitor your sleep. Again, the list goes on and on and on and on. We know that technology, I don't know how many of you have used, probably during COVID especially, connecting to a doctor via the technology we're using right now to connect. I'm in Calgary. The rest of you may be in Kelowna area or across BC or across Canada. But technology has enabled us to connect with others, but certainly our doctors, to receive medical information. And this connectivity through technology, whether we record it on our watches and it gets sent to our doctor, whether we record it on a glucose monitor that gets sent to our doctor, is all through the advent of these new technologies that we're seeing. You can see on the bottom right, I've got that continuous glucose monitor that are now morphing into not just glucose monitoring, but continuous ketone monitoring and other monitors, other substrates that can be looked at in our blood. And so that is something that we can get data on. Prosthetics that we see are rapidly advancing in technology that might enable somebody who otherwise could have lost the ability to be physically active, could now be more physically active thanks to the advent of prosthetics and beyond. And then, of course, very important, maybe not important, but very prevalent in today's day and age is artificial intelligence. And whether that's ChatGPT or Copilot, again, the list goes on and on and on when it comes to artificial intelligence, which has really helped a lot of individuals become physically active in a simple prompt of, this is my environment. I have a house. I've got maybe a bucket of honey. How might I be able to be physically active? I really enjoy stretching. Can you please give me some suggestions? And sure shooting, artificial intelligence is quite adept at doing that. And so we have with this technology, we have what we might call the advent of a self-quantification movement. And that really can be a positive thing. Now that we can quantify our health, whether you're living with a chronic disease and you can quantify your blood sugar, for example, if you're a person with diabetes, living with diabetes, you can quantify your blood sugar 24/7 if you want. If you have a fitness wearable watch, like I do, you can quantify your heart rate on a continuous basis. Blood pressure monitoring is becoming something that can be quantified. ECGs is something you can do. Blood oxygen monitoring, and I've got this later on that I'll go through a lot of these things. But this idea of being able to quantify our health in numbers is helping a lot of individuals take control of their health. But I will say it also can help or it can also hinder in a certain way where we feel that I've talked to individuals before that feel that, well, I can't exercise because I don't have my watch. I can't exercise. What good is my exercise if I go lift weights, if I can't even record it, and all of my followers on my Strava or my Garmin don't see that? Then why am I even going to exercise? So it's a word of caution to those of us, myself included, that when we do leverage this technology, that certainly can help us take control and be more active in our lives. It's very important that we find that fine line of exercising for our health as opposed to exercising for somebody else's health or for somebody else to see and like or drop kudos on our Strava. If you're a Strava user, you'll know that kudos are the likes that people can put on your news feed. So we have this 21st century, and there's a lot of ways that we have been able to engineer physical activity into our lives. So similar to what I did before, I want you to take a minute. I'll give you a couple seconds. I'll try to stop talking so there'll be silence so you can actually think. And I want you to write down how or places where you've been able to engineer physical activity into your life. How have you leveraged maybe technology, or how have you leveraged your current environment, maybe moving to a place that's a little bit more walkable, or maybe moving close to the H2O rec center so that you can go swim laps or go to Aquafit? How have you engineered physical activity into your life? And I want you to think about that, and I want you to write it down. So if you're taking notes or if you're actually following what I'm asking you to do, you'll have a thought about how you've engineered physical activity out, but now you'll have a thought of how you've engineered physical activity into your life. So take a second to do that. So as I mentioned, we have this yin and yang effect with the advent of technology in today's day and age, where it can help us take control of our chronic conditions, or even of our lives, but it also can help us maybe have a sense of losing control of our lives. So, as you can see here, I've talked about this. We've got lots of different things where maybe you wrote some of this down when I asked you to. We've got delivery services, groceries, food, Amazon. You can order diapers for your kid. Anything you want, you can pretty much order it right to your doorstep. Again, which could be a positive thing if you are needing to isolate or whatever that might be, born out of COVID and whatnot. But also very important that we now emerge from that COVID era and be able to say, I can go out. I am feeling that that is something I can do. Elevators, I mentioned that. Escalators, I mentioned that. Drive-in pickup, so I can go obviously drive through, or I can drive up to a restaurant, drive up to a grocery store. Don't even need to get out of my car. Click and collect, the same exact thing with a grocery store. You can click, order online, sit at your computer, and you can go collect. Extremely convenient. A lot of these things have become quite popular because of the convenience. And a lot of times we don't think about how this is really could be impacting our health because we don't need to add more steps. We don't need to get out and move like our ancestors did to find food. We can sit and everything comes to us. Quite convenient. But what about the solution? How have we tried to combat that in today's day and age? Gym memberships. Obviously, that's something that is quite common. There's a lot of gyms everywhere, and whatever your flavor is, whether it's CrossFit, boxing, jiu-jitsu, jump rope classes, you name it, gym memberships and exercise classes are everywhere. Qigong, I think I saw, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but I think I saw that in one of the list of the Embrace Aging emails. There's so many Tai Chi, there's so many things that you can find your flavor of physical activity. Running, swimming, biking, weight training, all of these things, not only can you do them and are they accessible for most individuals, you can actually find, like I said, apps that will not only tell you what you should run, how long you should be running, but they can give you feedback. If you film yourself running or swimming, they can give you feedback on improving your form. Weight training. Very easy to find a weight training program on online anywhere, or to communicate with an artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, to say, hey, I'm new to weightlifting. I'm a 56-year-old individual and I don't know anything about weight training. Can I get a program to increase my muscle mass? Because Jonathan gave me this workshop and he showed how important that is, right? So there is a solution. And we can, again, take control of our lives. So you might think, Jonathan, this is great. You've talked a lot about physical activity and how that can help me take control. But why? Why physical activity? Why are you so focused on physical activity besides, obviously, my extreme bias that I love to be physically active and I am physically active? But beyond that, why should you, a listener who may have stumbled upon this workshop, why should you care? As I mentioned before, first of all, you could become a billionaire. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, wow, I wish I could win the Lotto 649. But the reality is that if you could somehow put physical activity, exercise into a pill and figure out a way to do that, you would become a billionaire, because this would become the most widest prescribed drug in the entire world because of the physiological benefits that come from being physically active. So here's a little graphic. Now, don't get intimidated as we talk about this physiology here, but here's a lot of benefits that come from being physically active. Okay, and I'll try and highlight a few of these here. And again, don't worry if you don't know what these mean. I've got my email at the end, and I'm happy to field any questions that you might have. But for example, we know that this one right here, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, when we exercise, we're able to maintain or increase our VO2 max. And you might say, well, Jonathan, what the heck is that? Well, a VO2 max is a measure of how efficient your body is at using oxygen. When you're walking from your office to the printer, or when you're hauling in your groceries, to be able to move your bones, you need to move your muscles. For your muscles to be able to move your bones, you need oxygen for that to happen. And so it's a measure of the efficiency. And we know, again, I'll present this later, this is really related to longevity and quality of life, the ability to maintain your VO2 max or your functional fitness capacity. We also know that as we exercise, this helps with a lot of metabolic disorders. So our body becomes better. As I mentioned at the beginning, our ancient ancestors evolved from this fast and famine, where there was fast and famine that existed, and they were metabolically generally quite healthy. Today's day and age, we don't ever see famine ever. So when we are able to exercise and utilize those substrates and get our metabolism to be active, we create a healthier metabolic milieu in our bodies, or a healthy metabolic presence. And so that is really helps, for example, our liver to be healthy. It helps our muscle to be able to utilize that glucose. It helps with our bones to be more stronger bones. It helps our pancreas to be better at secreting insulin and to be able to use insulin. It helps our brains with mood and different psychiatric disorders to create more neurons and better synapses with those neurons that are communicating. Obviously, vascular health. If any of you have ever had a heart attack, heaven forbid, you know that you would be quite often prescribed cardiac rehab, which involves being active. Okay, so longevity effects you can see here. These have been associated with greater than 150 minutes of physical activity a week, but less than 2,000 minutes. These are benefits that we see when we can strike that balance, because like anything, too much of anything could be a bad thing. So another thought moment. This one you don't really need to write anything down, but I want you to see here, when you get to the ripe old age of 90 years old, or maybe 80 or 85, what would you rather look like? This individual on the right, my right, I guess, who clearly is in the not best situation, might be a little bit more reliant and may have lost their independence. Or this individual on the left, Charles Euster, who is, as far as to my knowledge, the oldest man to run a marathon. And he was in his 90s when he did this. So who would you rather look like? Be able to have your independence and enjoying life, or loss of your independence? And we know that physical activity can help to maintain, to be and achieve that maybe profile on the left. So let's bring all this together now. We've talked a lot about this, and well, let's bridge exercise, technology, and this aging gap. So I want you to think about, when you think about aging, and obviously the title for today is Aging Gracefully. What do you think about aging? What are your thoughts about aging? I'm going to show a video that I just love, and every time I'm asked to give a talk, even for embrace aging or not embrace aging, I try and show this video because it's so paradigm shifting to help understand what aging is or what aging isn't, and what we can achieve regardless of whether we're 90 or not 90, or what it might be. So we're going to watch this little video quick that talks about what is aging.
Hey, how's it going? You can stand right there, that's your mark. How you doing?
I'm great, how are you?
Great.
Awesome.
Just tell us your first name and your age.
My real age?
My name is Paolo. I'm 25 years old.
My name is Daniela, and I'm 19.
24. 35.
31, 33.
I'm 26 years old.
What age do you consider to be old?
Late 40s?
Maybe 50.
I feel like 30 is a new 20, so I'd say like 40 is old.
I'd probably say 50s.
I'd like you to show me how an old person would cross the street. Show me how an old person would send a text message. How might an old person do a push-up? What about jumping jacks. Okay, hang on. There's someone I want you to meet.
Hello, I'm Birch. I'm 66.
Hi, I'm Daphne, and I'm 68.
I'm Dee, and I'm 55.
George Fassbinder, 75.
My name is Parvati. I'm 70.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're gonna give you about 2 minutes to teach each other something that you are good at.
I can teach you a jump that I do.
Okay, please.
Both of your legs go up, and your arm goes up, and your left arm goes like to the side. Ready?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Lift 1, 2, 3. And bring it to your heart. And bring it to your heart. Add the head in. Yeah.
You want to try to get your balance and raise up. Now, you can bring your legs and your feet up. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So when you come out of a turn, either way, you go back to that basics.
Over. Now forward. Over. Yeah.
Square like this, and give me a hook. Hook. Jab, cross, hook, and then we'll go like this, all right?
1, 2, 3.
Now, what age might you consider to be old?
Probably 80 or 90. He could just do everything that I told him to do. An age that I would consider to be old now might be 100.
Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I said in the 50s. I thought that would be old. But when I thought about it, like...
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
I can do it. It really changed my thinking of what old is. You've taught me something today. Clearly, there's no way she's old, you know?
Now I know from today, hey, I don't look at age.
At my age, I feel like I did when I was in my 20s.
There's so many things that I still want to do. There's so many things that I can do. As long as I'm growing and learning, then age doesn't matter.
When people start stopping, that's when they start getting old.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Daphne. It was great meeting you.
How long have you been doing this? Is this a new skill?
40 years.
Wow.
Awesome. So as you can see, this is a really important video that really helps to not only redefine aging for us, but also to feel hopeful about aging gracefully, and that really aging is at the end of the day just a number. So I want to go into just briefly as we kind of wrap up a little bit of physiology here. So we talked about VO2 max and this idea of functional capacity and your body's ability to utilize oxygen. And you can see here, this is a study that was done that looked at individuals that were endurance trained or that had kept their VO2 max high, and those who were sedentary. And you can see that those who were sedentary, their VO2 max was quite substantially lower as they got older. And although it was a similar trend in the endurance trained, those who were endurance trained at the age of 60, 70 had a higher VO2 max than those who were sedentary. And that's important because we know that VO2 max is really related, as I mentioned earlier, to longevity, right? So health relates to long life. And you can see here that this study followed about 6,000 men. Half of them had cardiovascular disease. And as they were able to, you can see here exercise capacity. So that's another way to say VO2 max that I talked about earlier. And a lot of times individuals will measure it in METs. You can see that these are called metabolic equivalents. And you can see that as these individuals are able to perform more bouts of physical activity, so you can, this is the metabolic equivalents that are higher here as opposed to, if you can follow my blue dot, you can see lower here and higher here, the relative risk of death drastically decreases. The more that you're able to be physically active and have what we call these metabolic equivalents. And so that's regardless of whether you are living with a chronic disease or a normal subject. You can see the trend is the same. As you are able to maintain physical activity, again, whatever that might look like, and our exercise capacity, you have a relative risk of death that is a lot more decreased the more that we are able to exercise. Now, this one is also another really important one, I think. When we talk about VO2 max, and then when we talk about aging, we also need to think about muscle strength, right? And this idea of sarcopenia, which is a really common thing as we age. We do lose muscle. And you can see here that there's a peak when we're looking at muscle strength. But then there's what we call threshold of disability, okay? And those individuals who are able to train are able to maintain, here's the threshold of low physical performance or the threshold of disability that we have here when we look at muscle strength. So these are, there are numerical values, I don't have them here, but this just shows that as you're able to maintain physical activity and be physically active, these individuals don't ever really cross that threshold of disability or even that threshold of low physical performance, the ability to even to walk or carry groceries or to carry your laundry. Even though those who are sedentary, you meet that threshold quite earlier in life as opposed to those that don't. So muscle strength in aging is also an important consideration, and that can take a lot of different forms to try and maintain our muscle. And interestingly, this is another common misconception that we see in the world today when we think about taking control and aging gracefully is that, the older that I get, the less likely I have the chance to build my muscle mass. And this study shows that that's not necessarily the case. So strength gains were seen in all the subjects, and it improved. So these individuals, you can see this was in individuals, residents of a nursing home up to 96 years of age, were still able to increase their muscle mass, is essentially what this is saying. So it's never too late to try and gain that muscle, which will help increase our functional capacity to be able to carry laundry, to be able to run after our grandchildren, to be able to go out for a walk with our friends along the Okanagan Lake. And then we're also able to maintain that VO2 max, as I showed, that helps with the risk of death drastically decreasing. Again, so when we look at this relationship between different intensities of physical activity, you can see that the more physical activity we get, so again, there's those metabolic equivalents, and those are often measured per week, but really it's just leisure time physical activity. The more that we achieve, you can see this hazard ratio of mortality of death drastically decreases again, right? And whereas maybe if I'm not getting physical activity, my hazard ratio or the risk of dying is drastically increased, okay? So again, this really helps to show, okay, well, why should I care? Well, if you want to live a healthy life and you want to age gracefully, physical activity and exercise should be a keystone of your life. And that, again, as I mentioned, it doesn't have to be running a 5K. It can be whatever you enjoy, and it should be something that you're enjoying. So I've talked a lot about this, and you think, okay, Jonathan, well, I'm convinced. Well, where should I be? What should I be getting? And generally, in a 24-hour period, the recommendations for physical activity, as you can see here, should include at least 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous. And so moderate would be something where you're exercising, and maybe if you're a sweaty person like me, you might be sweating, but you can barely carry on a conversation, where you can carry on a conversation, but you do need to catch your breath every now and again after each sentence. Vigorous activity would be where you need to catch your breath maybe after each word. You need to kind of stop and take a few breaths. So if you're in that zone of breathing heavy and you're still able to talk with your friend, but you need to catch your breath every once in a while, that's kind of the sweet spot that we want to see in 150 minutes per week. And then trying to include at least 2 muscle strengthening exercises in a week. Now, I show this just in case individuals want to see, but a word of caution that often we see that individuals from a behavioral perspective get caught up on this. And they think, well, I can't do muscle training. I don't know. I don't want to. I don't enjoy it. So I'm not going to even be physically active. Or I'm not going to get 150 minutes per week. Even if I get 30 minutes in a week, that's all I can do. And so I'm not going to do it because that's not meeting what is advised by the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology. So a word of caution about that, because any physical activity can help you. And as I showed earlier, even an acute bout of physical activity, again, you decide to go for a walk today, maybe you haven't been exercising, but you decide to go for a walk today, those physiological benefits that I showed, you can achieve in a single walk. You can achieve more self-control. You can enhance your sense of control of your life if you're living with a chronic disease or living without a chronic disease, but you want to feel like you're getting more control. You can get that with a single bout. So don't let this 150 minutes get caught up and thinking, oh, I'm not going to get that, so I'm not going to. Any physical activity is good. So I want you to take a thought moment here and think about how you can take control. What's the big deal here? How has your life situation affected your physical activities and the things you enjoy? So are you in a state where you feel like you do have control and you are physically active? If so, how can you maintain that? What steps can you take to maintain that, to age gracefully? And if not, how can you change your life situation? What are some slight changes you can try to make? And now think about, okay, well, now that Jonathan's talked at me for the last 45 minutes, what do I understand about the benefits of physical activity? Maybe you didn't understand that before, and hopefully you do now, of thinking, well, now I could go to dinner conversation with my best friend, and I could say, hey, did you know that physical activity and exercise isn't just a way to make your body look good, or it isn't just a way to stay fit, but it's actually, there's physiological things like a medication that happen in our body when you are physically active. And hopefully you understand some of those benefits. And if you don't and you want to, again, I'll show my email and you can email me and I'm happy to engage and help you a little bit more in your journey. So think that through. And we have barriers, concerns, but we want to think through solutions. So often I get people say, well, I don't have a gym. I don't like the gym. Okay, well, that's okay. What can you do? Do you have a garden? Do you like gardening? Yeah, I do. Great. How about gardening? But again, trying to think through that intensity piece of thinking, what can I do that really gets where I have to catch my breath, that gets my breathing increased and maybe gets me a little bit sweaty. So where to start? You might say, Jonathan, we have this trifecta of aging, of technology, and of exercise that I've discussed today. And this is where it kind of all comes together. So we have this tech hub. There's a lot of features that are available if you're wanting to leverage technology. If you do have a watch, or maybe you're thinking about getting a watch, there's a lot of things that you can leverage with these watches. Medication reminders. Maybe you need to take your medication. You can set that up. GPS monitoring, which is really, we got incident detection here, which is something that individuals put as a high priority when they're going out to exercise, to say, I want to know that I'm going to be safe if I'm going to exercise alone, maybe. And so being able to track ourselves, but sharing that with loved ones, but also incident detection. A lot of these, the wearable technologies these days will be able to detect if you fall, and you can put in text, cell phone number or an email address of a loved one, and it will automatically send them a text message saying, we sensed an incident, and then that person can try and come reach out to you to verify. Heart rate monitoring. Obviously, our heart, we need our hearts to live, don't we? And so being able to monitor that. Workout suggestions. So beyond artificial intelligence, which you can find online, a lot of these devices have it built in now, where it will, based on your physical activity, it will show you and suggest what you should do based on what you have done. So again, a lot of the barriers we see of individuals is, I don't know what to do. I like to run, but I have no idea what I should do. So a lot of these devices will be able to do that. We now have the ability to integrate a lot of these devices with blood glucose monitoring that will pair to our watch, that will pair to an app, that will then give you all sorts of fantastic insights that you can show your doctor how great you are doing. And this is just skimming the surface. Again, there's applications, we could do a whole invasive, very deep study into applications in all sorts of different devices, wearable technology, t-shirts, sports bras, lots of things that have technology built in. So other useful features, obviously step counting is quite common, sleep monitoring, stress monitoring, body battery. A lot of these companies have created their own metrics that try to guesstimate or say, we think that your body battery might feel this much out of 100 after exercising or before. VO2 max estimates, as I said, if we can try and keep our VO2 max measurement as high as we can, our functional fitness is maintained and our ability and our independence are maintained as we age. Heart rate variability, as I mentioned, blood oxygen monitoring, which is very useful if an individual is living with sleep apnea or COPD. ECG, I mentioned, blood pressure, and core temperature. And again, this is just skimming the surface. The way technology is going is that this list is expanding greatly by the day, but certainly by the month and the year. These things are increasingly helping us quantify our health, which again is a positive thing, but also caution to find that balance. So just as we end here, the objective today was to hopefully you will want or feel a desire to make one small change to take to your life, to take control, to improve, again, if you're a clinician, your practice, but overall to improve your own health. And hopefully as you do that, you will notice some of these things that I mentioned physiologically. You may feel an increased sense of control. So that if a diagnosis ever does come, or if you're living with a diagnosis, you will feel that enhanced self control and enhanced sense of control, and you will be able to continue to age gracefully in a world that is enabling us to do so as we progress in our lives. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I'm very grateful for your attention. Hopefully you didn't get too bored with this presentation. And here's my email if you do want to reach out, if there's any additional questions or advice that you would like. I'm happy to field that. And I think we also do have some time for questions as well now, I think. But Kim or Jacketta will have to let me know. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And we definitely have time for questions. Nothing's come through the chat box yet, but please feel free, folks, to add in your questions for Jonathan into the chat, and I'm happy to read them out for him. While we're waiting for questions to come in, I of course have some. I always have some. I wonder, so as you were talking, I was thinking about my dad. So my dad is just turned 80, but he's an older 80 is what I consider him to be. Has not taken the best care of his body along the way. And I wonder, what might you suggest for him to start out when it comes to physical activity, knowing that, his mobility isn't great. He can get around, but he's not exactly, I can't imagine him doing moderate to vigorous exercise just yet. So what might you suggest he start with?
Well, that's a great question. I think, and a really important consideration too. And I think that when we talk about this idea of physical activity and exercise, it is all quite relative, right? And so whereas we might work with an elite athlete who is trying to run a 5K in under 20 minutes or even under 18 minutes, somebody who hasn't been physically active, and in your dad's case, on the older end, even just things like couch exercise. So resistance bands, a lot of older individuals really enjoy just sitting on a couch and doing leg extensions with resistance bands. Doesn't require them to get up, and that's a little bit more weight bearing. So similarly, balance is often a consideration as we age. And so a lot of individuals are scared to go for a walk because, well, I don't want to fall and break my hip. And so weight bearing exercises where we're sitting in a chair and able to do, you could do bicep curls, put the band around your foot and then grab the other end and do a bicep curl. Similarly with the leg extension you can do here. I'm doing it like you can see what my legs are doing, but those types of things are a really great place to start. And I worked with one individual years ago who was in a similar case, and they ended up doing a lot of kicking in their swim spa. They had a swim spa, hot tub, but they could change the temperature so it was a little bit cooler. And then would just, practice little kickings. And those small little changes really can benefit and can then help an individual feel more confident to say, okay, well, now I'm going to just walk down my hallway back and forth, 10 times. Or even a super common one that my parents are just in their early 70s, and this sounds so silly, but one thing I tell them regularly is you need to practice getting down on the floor and getting back up. And the more do that 10 times a day, because the more you can do that, that could save your life. Because those muscles, we don't do that, right? I don't regularly, I guess, unless I'm wrestling my kids, but as we age, we don't really get on the floor a whole ton. So even just getting down on the floor and finding and getting back up in itself is a great functional capacity, functional fitness.
I appreciate that a lot, and that's great advice, is the getting down on the floor. I'm gonna talk to him about that. I wonder what his capacity is on that actually. Now I'm just curious. And again, we haven't had a question come through the chat, so I'll just keep talking while we still have a little bit of time left. Along the same line, thinking of my dad again. So my dad isn't exactly the most tech savvy individual. Technology, he does have a cell phone. He has an iPhone, just due to the fact that texting is a way to connect with his children. So he did have to learn how to text, and that was begrudging, and it's an ongoing process. We've just evolved him. He had an iPhone 5 and he's just moved to an 11, but because the iPhone 5 died last weekend. So I wonder, when looking at all those technology options that are available, what might be the most friendly to a senior or a loved one that isn't as tech savvy, and to be able to support them with it as well, knowing that not only is the technology has to be fairly user friendly, but also user friendly in an ongoing way that doesn't require a lot of support.
That's a fantastic question and very, very relevant. So there's two different kind of things that I would suggest. Obviously, I think that there's a lot of solutions out there, but there are watches you can get now that don't even have a screen, that will just record your life. It will detect if you're exercising, and it will record your heart rate, and it will record your sleep, and send it all to your phone, which an individual might be a little bit more adept at using, to be able to open an app and see that. Because certainly, as you can imagine, the older that I get, it's harder to see my watch screen, and dexterity is also often lost. So, if I'm living with maybe a Parkinson's or something, it might be hard for me to actually navigate my watch. And so these types of watches where it will record regardless are also a great solution. But then also another thing that I've done in the past with participants is leveraging a platform where the exercise is recorded, but another individual can see that. And there's a lot of different platforms out there. And so for, whether that's a loved one or a daughter that can go on and be like, hey, Dad, you don't necessarily have to be there when they're exercising or doing things, but then you can see the outputs later and say, hey, Dad, you did incredible exercise. You got your heart rate up. Or, hey, Dad, I saw you got 5,000 steps, to kind of be that encouraging thing helps as well. So just a few thoughts, but definitely a consideration that we could talk about for a long time.
Definitely. Well, I appreciate that. And I hadn't thought of that of the watches that don't have the screen. All I've seen are, iWatches, that kind of thing. So I like to know that there's different things out there. And of course there is. Technology advances so fast. And Jaquetta, for those that haven't looked in the chat yet, take a look. There was a fall and injury prevention webinar that also is on YouTube that offers some exercise suggestions as well, which is really, really great. I know we have 1 minute left before I do the closeout. Jonathan, is there anything you wanted to end with before we go?
No, I don't think so. I guess if I were to end on any thought for those who are still listening, is truly one question that I do get asked a lot is, well, what's the best exercise that I should do? What's the most effective? And undoubtedly, the best kind of exercise you should do is the exercise A, that you will do, or B, that you love. Because if you love it, it is all about longevity. If I do a 6-month exercise intervention It might help my strength for 6 months, but if I hate it, I'm going to stop and I won't get that longevity benefits. So if you can remember anything from the talk, hopefully you decide to choose an exercise that you really love. And there are, like I said, there's a flavor for everybody. So do a discovery, find what you do enjoy and stick with it, because you will be able to stick with it because you'll enjoy it.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. And thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We encourage you to attend other events scheduled for Embrace Aging Month. Please visit our website at okanaganembraceaging.com for all the other events and registration. We look forward to growing this event in the Okanagan and encourage anyone interested in supporting Embrace Aging in the future to please contact us. Contact information is available on our website. You'll receive an email with a link to an online evaluation form, and we welcome everyone's feedback and suggestions for planning Embrace Aging events in the near future. Thank you so much again, and take good care of you and yours. Jonathan, it was lovely to meet you, and I feel energized to go out and have a walk. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kim. Good luck on your new job.
Thank you. Take care,
See you.
everybody. Bye.